Hello everybody, welcome to AWS Online Tech Talks. My name is Murtaza Chaudhry. I'm a Senior Product Manager with AWS. The topic today is gain control over your license usage and reduce costs using AWS License Manager. What to expect from this session? I'll walk you through the capabilities of AWS License Manager. You will learn how to configure licensing rules and track different types of licenses across your AWS accounts. You will also learn how to manage licenses centrally with instances across AWS and on-premises. I'm also going to share a couple of customer testimonials on how they are using AWS License Manager. There are license management challenges of staying compliant, controlling overages, and managing vendor audits. Unable to control usage, restrict overages, and report usage correctly puts customers at risk of vendor audits. Managing software license inventory costs customers a lot of resources, including significant time and manual effort. With the agility of cloud, where instances can be spun up within minutes, managing licenses becomes even harder. Enterprises have to spend significant time and resources to manage onerous negotiations, audits, and true-ups with software vendors, often incurring heavy penalties in the process. When a true-up or audit comes up, customers have to scramble to figure out how many licenses are used. Customers use a variety of software licenses, including operating system licenses such as Windows Server, Red Hat, SUSE, database licenses such as SQL Server, Oracle databases, IBM DB2, application licenses such as SAP ERP, Microsoft Dynamics, SharePoint Server, IBM WebSphere, and MQ, and other third-party licenses. With AWS License Manager, customers can easily bring licenses to AWS, remain compliant, and benefit from existing investments in enterprise agreements. License Manager is a one-stop solution for managing licenses from a variety of software vendors such as Microsoft, Oracle, IBM, SAP, and others. License Manager simplifies software license management for hybrid environments across AWS and on-premises. With License Manager, you get the flexibility and control to track and measure compliant license usage and to proactively prevent overage and non-compliant license usage. You can set up License Manager based on your organizational structure and processes. AWS License Manager provides built-in integration with multiple AWS services to make license management easier. We will talk about those integrations later in this presentation. Now let me talk about roles involved in license management. We have heard from customers that typically there is a license administrator, an asset manager, or maybe somebody from the procurement department who is responsible for managing licenses, who is responsible for managing the true-ups and audits and reporting out usage. And then there are users in those organizations who are spinning up instances. The administrator is responsible for ensuring that all the licenses that the users use are accounted for. Now in AWS License Manager, we are targeting the administrators or the asset managers, and our aim is to make the experience for users as seamless as possible so that users can simply launch instances and go ahead with business as usual, whereas administrators get the accounting and the dashboards to make sure that their work of managing true-ups and audits becomes easier. It is very easy to get started with License Manager. Step 1, administrators start by creating rules based on their enterprise agreements. They can do it using AWS Management Console, CLI, or API. Step 2, administrators enforce licensing rules by attaching them to instance launch. Once rules are enforced, the service automatically keeps track of instances as users spin up and down, and the organization stays compliant per their license terms. Additionally, administrators can also discover software that your users bring in after spinning up instances. And step 3 is that administrators can keep track of usage using AWS License Manager's built-in dashboard. Let's examine each of these steps. Defining license rules. Administrators can define rules in AWS License Manager based on their enterprise agreements. Here is an example showing how licensing rules are created as a configuration in AWS License Manager based on vendors' product terms. Administrators get flexibility of defining rules based on their vendor agreements. When defining licensing rules, administrators can specify how licenses should be measured. Customers can manage any license which is based on vCPUs, physical cores, physical sockets, and number of instances. Customers can also specify usage limits and define them as soft or hard limits. Soft limits allow going over the allocated number of licenses, with License Manager notifying through SNS notifications, whereas hard limits, License Manager won't allow customers to incur overage by blocking launches. Administrators can also specify any other constraints that license terms might have, such as minimum and maximum values of cores and sockets, tenancy restrictions, usage of optimized CPU, etc. Now that we have defined the licensing rules, let's talk about the next step, which is enforcing rules. Enforcing rules means setting up centralized governance and ensuring as an administrator that any usage of BYOL software is being tracked. As an administrator, you get 4 different ways to enforce licensing rules. The first way is by attaching the license configuration to an EC2 launch template or an AMI. The second way is to attach it to an AWS CloudFormation template. The third is to do it through AWS Service Catalog. And the fourth is to do it through the AWS SDKs and tools. We provide you multiple options here so that you could choose a way based on your preference. If you have a Golden AMI, you could attach the license configuration to the Golden AMI directly by associating it. If you are using EC2 launch template, we provide an additional property where you can select one or more license configuration for an EC2 launch template. Similarly, for AWS CloudFormation, we have a new property where you can specify the license configurations to use with your launch. And you can import that AWS CloudFormation template to Service Catalog to set up centralized administration. And if your preference is to use APIs, then you can use the APIs that License Manager provides so that anytime a launch is happening, the license configuration gets automatically attached. Now, what this means by enforcing is that all the rules that you defined earlier are checked at the time of launch, and the limits are evaluated. So any launch that is not adhering to the rules won't be allowed. It can be a rule or it can be the usage limit. To control overage, if you have defined a limit as a hard limit, it would stop a launch from going ahead if the launch is breaching the hard limit. And if you have defined it as a soft limit, it would notify you while allowing the launch to go through. And if there is a breach in the rule itself, let's say you are using a core-based license and you are trying to use it on a vCPU, it won't allow because that's a mismatch in the rule. And that's how the enforcement works. And using these multiple options, you can set up the rules, enforce them, and make sure that whenever a user launches an instance, it's automatically tracked by License Manager. Firstly, it is the rules are evaluated, and secondly, when the launch is permitted, the license accounting automatically happens, and you could see the usage on the dashboard. Now, let's look at step 3. Once the rules are enforced, AWS License Manager automatically keeps track of instance launches, and the built-in dashboard gets populated. Administrators can view usage limit alerts and take actions such as procuring more licenses as needed. When there is an upcoming license true-up or audit, administrators no longer have to embark on a daunting task. Figuring out how many licenses they are using and which resources are using them is no longer a challenge with AWS License Manager's built-in dashboard. Additionally, administrators can discover software installed on instances. License Manager's built-in integration with AWS Systems Manager, and it leverages System Manager's inventory service to search for software. They can search for software, attach licensing rules to instances, and track them through their lifetime using License Manager's dashboard. There is an automated setup that License Manager performs to enable discovery. The setup stores the data in customer's account with S3, Athena, and Glue in your account. AWS License Manager enables customers to manage licenses across hybrid environments, that is, across AWS and on-premises, and also across the multiple AWS accounts. Customers have told us that they typically have multiple accounts and have asked for centralized license management across accounts. They can define licensing rules once and use across AWS accounts. AWS License Manager seamlessly integrates with AWS organizations, where administrators can sign into their master account and link all their organizational accounts to manage licenses across their organization. AWS License Manager integrates with a service called AWS Resource Access Manager to share licensing rules. This service allows sharing licensing rules from one account to another. AWS License Manager simplifies the multi-account experience by providing a one-click setup experience of linking organizational accounts and sharing licensing rules, and provides cross-account search of Systems Manager using another capability of Systems Manager, which is called Resource Data Sync. AWS License Manager integrates with various AWS services. Customers can manage licenses used by instances on Amazon EC2, AWS Marketplace, and any AWS Systems Manager configured instance. The integration with Systems Manager enables customers to manage hybrid environments across AWS and on-premises. There is built-in integration with AWS organizations and AWS Resource Access Manager to provide a seamless cross-account license management experience. There is built-in integration with Army's EC2 launch templates, AWS CloudFormation, and Service Catalog to provide different options for licensing rule enforcement. And the built-in integration with Amazon SNS enables customers to receive notifications on the SNS topic for any license usage violations. Now let's talk about pricing. There are no additional charges for using AWS License Manager. Customers only pay for the resources they use. The resources may include an S3 bucket for storing AWS Systems Manager based software, Amazon Athena, and AWS Glue for enabling discovery of the Systems Manager data, and Amazon SNS for notifications. Customers are showing keen interest in License Manager. Many customers are using License Manager to make licensing true-ups and audits easier and control usage based on their license terms. I'd like to share a couple of testimonials. Xero is one of the largest software as a service companies in the world who offers cloud-based accounting software platform. Xero has been using AWS License Manager since its preview days and has used AWS License Manager to manage SQL Server licenses. Here is a quote from Mr. John Bowker, product owner at Xero. The next quote is from Pearson. Pearson is the world's largest learning company and helps people around the globe make progress in their lives through learning. Pearson has leveraged AWS License Manager to reduce time spent on license management. The quote is from Mr. Ian Wright, the VP of Cloud and Operations at Pearson. I'll walk you through a few product demonstrations. I'll show you how, as IT administrator or license administrator, I can set up License Manager for different types of licenses and how users can use licenses in a compliant manner. Before I start showing you how to use License Manager, I'd like to give you a quick peek at what a dashboard looks like. So using the built-in dashboard that AWS License Manager provides, an administrator can get a centralized view across multiple products, across hybrid environments, including AWS and on-premises, and across multiple accounts through which licenses are being used. Now let me go ahead and start setting up License Manager. So this is the settings page. In the settings page, we have heard from customers that they want to manage licenses across their organizational accounts. We have offered a very simplified way of doing that. I have already enabled it, that's why you see it disabled, but setting up cross-account license management is as simple as enabling these two checkboxes. The first one links your organizational accounts. For this, you would need to have all service enabled in your AWS organizations. And once you link your organizational accounts, as accounts join or leave an organization, License Manager would automatically keep in sync with their accounts and help you manage licenses across all your accounts. The second checkbox that you see here is to enable discovery. You can perform a cross-account inventory search. This uses AWS Systems Manager, which stores the data of the inventory service in an S3 bucket in your master account and uses Amazon Athena and AWS Glue to serve that data to offer you a seamless discovery experience. And the third information here is the SNS notification. We offer you a default notification, but you can customize it, and you can even customize the notification to say how you want to receive the alerts. You can do that in the SNS console directly, and you can configure either a text message, an email, or decide to receive alerts through an application. Once you apply these settings, you have onboarded, and then you can go ahead and start creating your licensing rules. Let me now start by creating a license configuration, which is a set of rules where I would define how the licenses should be used, and I can also add usage limits as hard or soft limits. I'd like to take the example of SQL Server license. So let me give the license configuration name as SQL Server. You can leave a description, which can typically be a note to yourself as a license administrator. The next configuration that you do here is the license type. You get 4 options. You can track based on vCPUs, you can track based on cores, based on sockets, or based on number of instances. How this works is, if you choose vCPUs, when an instance is coming up at the time of launch, it would query the profile of the instance and deduct the number of vCPUs that an instance has and account for that many licenses. If you're using cores, that means physical cores. If you're using a product such as Windows Server or SQL Server that needs to be managed by physical cores, you can do so and you can track the number of physical cores that a license is using. Similar for physical sockets. Next is the number of instances. There may be licenses which are not dependent on either the CPU's core sockets or even memory for that matter. It wants to count how many instances are coming up. Such examples are maybe a firewall license or a load balancer. For those kind of licenses, you can choose instances. So coming back to the example for SQL Server, let me go ahead and choose vCPUs. So the next field, number of vCPUs, is optional. Once you select the license type, you can choose either to only track how much consumption is there, or you can provide a limit so that license manager tracks how many licenses are allocated. Let me provide a small number here for the purpose of the demo. So I provided 10 here. I get two options now. I can either configure it as a soft limit or a hard limit. So when I provide number here, by default it becomes a soft limit. I can make it a hard limit by clicking this next checkbox, enforce license limit. So the soft limit sends a notification when there is a breach, and hard limit will stop a launch from going over the allocated limit here. If there are any additional rules that I want to specify, I can do it here, like any minimum restriction, minimum CPU restriction, maximum CPU restriction. Now, if you're using the optimize CPU feature of EC2, once you turn that on, you can select the vCPU optimization rule here, which will take the number of cores or threads that you have configured using optimized CPU instead of taking the default vCPUs from the instance directly. So for this demo, I'm going to submit this. So now I have created a license configuration. So that is the first step. The second step is to enforce the license configuration. I have multiple options to do that. I can either do it through an AMI, I can do it through EC2 launch template, CloudFormation, Service Catalog, or the SDK and tools. In this demo, I'm going to show you how to enforce it through an AMI. So I will click on Associate. Now I'm going to associate with the AMI. I'm choosing the SQL Server AMI, and I'm going to associate it. Now as a license administrator, I have created a license configuration and I have enforced the license configuration using the SQL Server AMI. I'm now going to show you how, as a user, I use an AMI to spin up an instance and how License Manager automatically keeps track of licenses used. I'm going to EC2 console. I'm bringing up my list of AMIs. So I'm going to use the SQL Server AMI to launch an instance. So here's the list of instances that I can possibly launch. So let me go ahead and launch an M4 2 extra large. So as I launch the instance, License Manager would evaluate the rules that I had created. And as the instance comes up, the accounting for that license used would automatically happen. If I go back to the dashboard here, you can see that the license configuration shows 8 vCPUs used, which is the instance that the user just spun up. Now, if the user terminates the instance, the licenses would go back to the pool, and this would become 0 again. Now, let's say there is another launch that the user wants to do. I'll wear the hat of a user again. I'll go back to the list of armies. I'll use the SQL Server Army, and I go to launch an instance. I'll launch the same instance again. So I launched an M42 extra large last time. I'm going to do the same. You can see this instance launch failed. This is because the license administrator had configured a hard limit, and this instance launch was breaching that hard limit. If you go back to the dashboard, you see that the licenses consumed is still the same. Now, let me show you how to perform discovery. The experience that we discussed so far was how to proactively manage licenses through the enforcement mechanism, so that as the license administrator enforces licensing rules on an army, any instance launch that the user does is automatically tracked by license manager. So the next scenario here is there is an instance already running and users are allowed to install additional software there. Now, as an administrator, I want to find out how many instances are out there which is running a particular software. So let me say I want to find out how many instances are running Microsoft SQL. So I can simply search the inventory, which is using Systems Manager under the curtains here, and License Manager would give me a list of the instances which has SQL Server installed. I can go ahead and inspect what application names, what components of SQL Server are installed, what application version is it, and what is the application install time. Based on this, I can go ahead and attach the license configuration to these instances. I can choose the same license configuration that I created earlier, and once I associate, all these instances would be tracked through their lifetime. Also pay attention to this checkbox here, share license configuration with all my member accounts. Because we have enabled cross-account inventory search, you can do the discovery centrally. You can discover licenses across all your accounts through your organizational master account, and you can seamlessly share your licensing rules across all your accounts and track them centrally. Once, as an administrator, I have attached license configuration to instances, the instances are tracked through their lifetime. And when instances get terminated, the licenses go back to the pool. It's important to note that the same search inventory experience serves you instances from AWS as well as on-premises. Any instance that is configured with the Systems Manager agent would automatically appear here when you are searching for a software. Coming back to the previous example, when I search for SQL, it would also show AWS and on-premises and across multiple accounts. So you do not have to do anything separately to manage your on-premises instances. And the dashboard always provides you centralized information on how your licenses are being used. I'd like to go back to my presentation now. For additional resources you could use, you can visit License Manager website for the product documentation. We also have additional blogs. We have a blog for how to track SQL Server licenses, and our team is working on putting together additional blogs. Thank you everybody for attending this online tech talk. Before I open it up for Q&A, I'd like to summarize what we discussed. Being able to leverage existing licenses is an important consideration. So License Manager helps you gain control over how your licenses are used across your organization, and you can centrally manage licenses, enforce the governance, and easily manage your true-ups and audits. Secondly, you can reduce your licensing cost by using your existing licenses, and License Manager helps you stay compliant based on the licensing rules that you define using your enterprise agreement. So start using License Manager and make your next licensing true-up or audit easier. I'd like to address the frequently asked questions. We hear customers asking us about the types of software licenses that AWS License Manager supports. Now, AWS License Manager supports a variety of software licenses across multiple software vendors. Customers get the flexibility to create licensing rules and manage a wide variety of licenses. Customers are managing licenses such as Windows Server, SQL Server, Oracle databases, Adobe, IBM DB2, Palo Alto Network firewalls, load balancers such as Nginx, and many others. Next frequent question that we get is, how do I figure out which software licenses are supported? Now, License Manager supports any software that is based on vCPUs, physical cores, physical sockets, and number of instances. So if your software is measured on any of these dimensions, you can track usage using License Manager. Does License Manager support on-premises is the next question we get. Yes, License Manager does support on-premises along with AWS and provides you a central way of managing licenses. Next question we typically hear is, does License Manager support multiple AWS accounts? Yes, it does. Using License Manager, you can manage licenses across multiple AWS accounts. And for organizational setup, we provide a very simplified experience where you can link organizational accounts through a few clicks and seamlessly manage licenses centrally across all your accounts. Next question we hear is, how does License Manager enforce licensing rules? As we discussed earlier, License Manager allows an administrator to enforce rules by attaching them to an ARMY, CloudFormation template, EC2, launch template, service catalog, or using the SDK and tools. To control overages, an administrator can define hard licensing limits, which helps in stopping launches that take the usage over the allocated limit. And administrators also have the flexibility to define soft licensing limits, which do not stop launches, but notifies in case of any breaches. Another frequently asked question is, does License Manager need an agent? So if you want to perform discovery of software, like I showed in the search inventory experience, then you need an agent. And the agent that is used in this case is the AWS Systems Manager agent. It needs to be installed and activated for you to perform discovery. Another frequently asked question is, what kind of reports do I get? License Manager provides you readily available built-in dashboards, which at any time tells you how many licenses you're using, how the licenses are allocated, which instances are using your licenses, and it also shows you the list of alerts that you might have on any limit breaches. Thank you for listening to the presentation. Now we have some time for Q&A. Please let me know if you have any questions.